to do that. Maybe, just to piss everybody off, or I don't know. I don't know what the intention is behind that, but maybe that's what their lawyers said they have to do in order to pull this whole illegal, treasonous, seditious thing off. This is a permanent restructuring of the government of the United States. It's the complete dissolution of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, uh, everything that this country was founded on. The law of our land is going to be totally dissolved under this order and reestablished according to uh, Obama, his orders, and it really doesn't matter who's in there. Obama, Romney, you name it, it doesn't matter. They're just carrying out orders for, I guess, the elitists above them that are calling the shots here. Part D, the Secretary of Commerce, in cooperation with the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and other agencies shall 1. Analyze potential effects of national emergencies on actual production capability, taking into account the entire production system. That's the whole country, everything that gets produced here, the whole thing, including shortages of resources, and develop recommended preparedness measures to strengthen capabilities for production increases in national emergencies, and to perform industry analyses to assess capabilities of the industrial base to support the national defense, and develop policy recommendations to improve the international competitiveness of specific domestic industries and their abilities to meet national defense program needs. Okay, part 2, priorities and allocations. Section 201, priorities and allocations authorities. The authority of the President, conferred by Section 101 of the Act, and it specifies the section, to require acceptance and priority performance of contracts or orders other than contracts of employment, to promote the national defense over performance of any other contracts or orders, and to allocate materials, services, and facilities as deemed necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense is delegated the following agency heads. Now, I have to stop and discuss what this is talking about here for those that don't understand. I'm going to reread it and explain it in detail. The authority of the President to require acceptance and priority performance of contracts or orders other than contracts of employment, to promote the national defense over performance of any other contracts or orders, and allocate material, services, and facilities deemed necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense. What he's talking about is a complete takeover of every business that they want to take over, that they say has a function in carrying out the needs of the national defense, and to require acceptance of the government's work orders as priority performance of contracts. In other words, any work that any of these companies or businesses or farms or banks or you name it, anything that people are currently doing to make a living, the contracts of business that they currently have and are fulfilling are ceased. They no longer have priority over the jobs that the government gives it to do. So, and then it delegates authority to enforce this usurpation of authority, okay? To promote the national defense over performance of any other contracts or orders, and allocate material, services, and facilities. That's a takeover of everything. Business, materials, services, facilities, you name it. They no longer work for themselves. They're no longer, this is a
Yeah,
national.
like say there's a steel mill. Not that there's many left in this country, but say there's a steel mill. Under this, the government comes rolls up one day with armed troops and physically takes over the entire steel mill and says, "We need this now for us. It's no longer the profits don't go to you. None of the steel, nothing goes to you. No, all this is controlled and maintained by the government, for the better of this country."
That's exactly right. That's what this is talking about.
It
Hitler
would be
did that too, by the way.
nationwide.
Yeah, that's like Stalin and Hitler. What did you say,
Right.
Tim?
They would just come in and nationalize everything.
Yeah,
That's
that's
right.
pretty much what it sounds like.
That's exactly what they're doing. Okay, now the authority to enforce this is delegated to the following agency heads. One, the Secretary of Agriculture with respect to food resources, food resource facilities, livestock resources, veterinary resources, plant health resources, the domestic distribution of farm equipment and commercial fertilizer. They're taking over anything that has anything to do with food production at all, period, or fertilizer production and distribution. The Secretary of Energy, with respect to all forms of energy, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, with respect to health resources, and you'll see that this is the nationalization of the medical, uh, the entire medical industry. They talk later on about taking over all facilities that have to do with medicine at all. Drugstores, hospitals, you name it, it's going to be under the control of the Secretary of Health and Human Services under the authority of President Obama. And by the way, he delegates all of these heads presidential authority. You'll hear that as well. Um, so the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Transportation with respect to all forms of transportation, including your vehicle, by the way, the Secretary of Defense with respect to water resources. In other words, the military is going to be in control of all water resources, all of it. Your well, your standing water in your yard, you name it. The water pipes under your property. They're taking control of everything, and it's going to be under the direction of the Secretary of Defense.
And who would they be taking their marching orders from in the future? Probably some world government.
Right,
And if you know anything about the law of the sea, it's a treaty that the UN, that the United States has been being pushed into ratifying for years now, and every administration, I think since the Clinton administration, has been pushed to it has pushed Congress to ratify, and it hasn't been ratified yet. But this pretty much would do an end run around it because now you have them controlling everything. So it doesn't matter. All they have to
right,
do is get marching orders from somebody else, and they'll say, "Okay, troops, go do this." It's compartmentalization. So it's to me, this is an end run around a lot of things, and then through force, they'll just have all these treaties signed, so quote unquote, it's official on the books, and
right,
then boom, march right into tyranny.
right. And don't forget, I mean, this also includes all aquifers and everything else under military control. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. Six, the Secretary of Commerce with respect to all other materials, services, and facilities, including construction materials. That means people, a labor force, facilities, place to work, construction materials, you name it, the Secretary of Commerce is going to be in control of everything. Okay? Not the boss at your job, not yourself if you're self-employed. No, the Secretary of Commerce is now your daddy. Okay? Section B. The Secretary of each agency delegated authority under subsection A of this section, resource departments, shall plan for and issue regulations to prioritize and allocate resources and establish standards and procedures by which the authority shall be used to promote the national defense under both emergency and non-emergency conditions. Nationalization of everything under emergencies or peacetime, non-emergency conditions. Now, I mean, he's talking about implementing this now, changing the very fiber of this country. Each secretary shall authorize the heads of other agencies as appropriate to place priority ratings on contracts and orders for materials, services, and facilities needed in support of programs approved under Section 202 of this order. C. Each resource department shall act as necessary and appropriate upon requests for special priorities assistance. In other words, whatever they say is a priority, the department has to act upon, as defined in Section 801 of this order, in a time frame consistent with the urgency of the need at hand. Okay? When we say jump, you're going to say how high and not waste a second doing it. In situations where there are competing program requirements for limited resources, the Resource Department shall consult with the Secretary who made the required determination under Section 202 of this order. Such Secretary shall coordinate with and identify